If you grew up with an inferiority complex, or perhaps you lived an entire life feeling inferior, but you didn't realize that was happening, this video is for you. I know that I was always striving. I grew up in a single income household, single mom. Father was a musician. I'm mixed race Mexican American. My father's Mexican, my mother's white. There was so much confusion there that I didn't even realize that that's what it was in so many ways. All I remember is that I was always trying to keep up. I think that's a very natural thing for kids, for most kids. I don't want to say all kids, or maybe a lot of kids. I think actually when you get further along, your whole life revolves around your friends and what you think your friends are doing, not doing what they think, etc. I have so much compassion for coming of age in the social media era because that was not my experience because I'm a Gen Xer. But something that I became aware of, I would say in the last few years, was how much inferiority has driven my life. And there is a cost. And I have, in many ways, I don't know if I could say healed it. I think I definitely have transcended it in so many ways. I've definitely become aware and conscious of it. And I don't make decisions as much from that place. Like I don't guide my life from it. But there is an imprint that can happen when we're young that even with healing, it still sneaks up on you. And I'm present to it because I connected with my best friend. I've known her since the 4th grade, earlier today. We used to be in each other's lives a lot more than we are today, but we're still close. It's just that friend you have that connection with. But I had this awareness of this inferiority that gets triggered. And I kind of felt it. I didn't think of it as inferiority, but I kind of felt it in my body when I first started sharing some things with her. We first started talking. But as I was reflecting and later on in my day, I was like, oh, that's what was happening. So I'm going to share a little bit about my story in hopes that it might connect and support you. Because what I've definitely learned and what I think is so important, and this all relates back to something that you will hear me talk a lot about here, and that is our inner operating system, is understanding how we became, how you became who you are. I think it's fascinating and interesting, but when you become aware of it, it's illuminating. It's empowering and it can create so much freedom because you'll start to see yourself and your life from this like 4D view instead of the 3D view. And you'll also you'll have more compassion for yourself, for your humanity, and likely see a lot of things in a different way. It doesn't change your life, but it can definitely shift your life experience. And ultimately, that often does shift our life, is our experience, because our life is really, it's all happening through how we're perceiving it and metabolizing it and what we deduce it, how we hold it, right? How we think about it, how we evaluate it. And all that's happening through our brain in many, many ways. And so when you update your inner operating system where you become aware of it, then that helps you to, you're just coming from a different, more conscious place. That's really the word I'm looking for. So I'll share with you a little bit more about my inferiority story because I think a lot of kids have variations, but mine came from the fact that I was mixed race. I had a Mexican last name. I always identified as Mexican, but my father didn't really actively raise me. When he would come home, my parents were married for 11 years of my life. And, um, and when he would come home, I remember spending quality time with him. But because he left so much, there was a part of my psyche that shut down to him because that was very painful. And then eventually my parents split and he moved to Illinois and was in Chicago for most of my life. So my life wasn't around a lot of my Mexican family. I never learned how to speak Spanish. But, kids remind you of who you are. So they tease me about my name. And I felt my difference. And then I also felt difference because I didn't really have, the economics that a lot of my friends had. And aside from one friend in elementary school, I didn't really have any friends that had had anything going on like me. I didn't have any Mexican friends. I didn't have any mixed race friends. And the one that I mentioned, I believe her parents were Cuban. Um, and after elementary school, we lost touch because I eventually moved to a different part of town as well. But my point is I did not feel like I fit anywhere. And I remember that our limited income and this, like, the scarcity in the home and the, turn the lights off and never having enough. And I really wanted things that my friends had, but I was never able to have those. And my mom didn't have the money, and she probably would say this to this day, but I also know that she did not want to spend money on labels. Like, that was like kind of something that she was not going for. And boy, do I have some horror stories about how she tried to substitute those. But the point being is, like, there wasn't enough, and that energy and filled my home. And so if you come from a home where you had any kind of financial insecurity, like, that informs your nervous system. It informs your perception of money and security. It informs definitely your money story, which then will continue to play out in your life if you're not aware of it. But it sets an imprint, right? I mean, every home has something. If you grew up with wealth, but maybe you had parents that were heavy drinkers, that impacted you. Like, that's part of the human experience. That's happening. So I had that. It was the Mexican and the mixed race and not having anyone that I identified near in my life that I could feel connected to and get to know it. I felt a sense of shame around being a Mexican because I didn't feel, and I still don't, to be honest, feel like this country values Latinos and Latinas. And a lot of Latinas are service workers, and we know what's happening in the world right now, at least in the United States, I should say. And and then I felt shame that I wasn't really in the Mexican culture. I didn't speak Spanish. I felt inferior and out of place with all those things. But really, also the socioeconomic piece got me. I was drawn to friends that not like were really wealthy, but I had mostly friends that had wealth. Their parents had wealth. They didn't need anything. They had cars before they were 16. They didn't do loans for school. They didn't, parents helped them buy homes. Like, they didn't have any issues like that. I believe that I made a decision early on that, like, I did not want to have that as my experience. So that very much created an ambition in me and a desire, but it pumped this muscle that became really all about doing and pushing and trying to keep up because I didn't feel like I was enough. I didn't feel like my story was the right story or the good story. And I mean, I remember it in college. I remember it in sorority. I remember it with how I related to my friends' parents. My friends' parents often wanted to talk to me. I was often that kid who would talk to parents in the kitchen. And so I had those relationships because I was kind of a little adult, a little grown up for my age. What I'm really getting at is just kind of painting the picture of what my experience was. But I understood that about myself. And I remember, like, if I reflect on college, I remember, like, some of the challenges I had. A lot of them were in relationship, and financial aid was a huge, like, through line of my college experience because I went to a UC school, and every 10 weeks was a new quarter. And that means every 10 weeks I had to go through financial aid again. And it was just so much, it was so anxiety, it was so stressful. And yeah, it just was embarrassing, all the things. And, I can't remember, I'm not going to give you a whole timeline, but I can't remember all the ways this has shown up. But one of the things that I became aware of in the last couple of years is it just more healing that was happening in my life was recognizing that, oh, I've been operating from a place of inferiority. I've just never felt like I was enough or the right one or chosen, and that very much directed me. It did make me very ambitious. It did make me create and achieve a lot. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but there is a cost. There's a cost to operating our lives through a filter that in this case, in many cases, is built in lack, or in an unhealthy motivation and not being aware of it, of creating an entire life at the response to that unconscious identity. And that's really what a lot of humans are moving from because it's part of the human condition. And if you're not on a personal growth path, if you aren't learning about how you became who you are and how you see the world is literally a derivative of what your meaning-making brain deduced throughout your life. Like how like that saying, there's like evidence of families and that two kids can talk about something and they'll have completely different perceptions of like what happened. That's because we all have our own filter, but we're also becoming a version of ourself that's a response to all the things that happened around us and what we decided they mean about us, about them, about the situation, about our culture, our religion, money, all the things. And so essentially we are an accumulation of that. And if we're not conscious of that and we're not questioning that, we're not evaluating that, we're not recognizing that we could actually update that and shift that and or not live from that, then we will just unconsciously live in response to that and also wonder why. And so many of our perceptions of self are adapted styles based on how we were relating to things. And we think of those as like our faults or our defects, and they're not. They're part of our human experience, and often they are part of an unconscious human experience. That's a little bit of my inferiority story. And I share this because I want to share with you as I, complete the video a little bit about how you can work with this, because my awareness that I could feel it when I was talking to my friend, I was telling her, we haven't spoken in a while. We're trying to get together. So we end up having a chat. And when I started telling her a story that I'm judging about myself, I felt myself feeling that more intensely because she represents the part of me that didn't feel like I was ever enough. And if I really sat with that feeling right now, I could get emotional. Like I can feel that. And I'm sharing this, and I'm feeling inspired to share this because in a way I really want to normalize it. I want to share with you in a vulnerable way because I want you to know that there's nothing wrong with you if that's how you feel. That if you can relate to any part of this, this is not a defect. This is part of your human experience. It's part of what your sweet young brain, like how it adapted to how it felt about what was happening around you. And there's such an opportunity to be compassionate for that happened to be part of your experience. It doesn't define you, even though we think it does, even though it's colored actions and choices. I mean, it's like why so many people choose unhealthy relationships and partnerships, because that's what you saw, or that's what it's all those things. Like that's part of the human experience. And starting to understand it is really, that's where your power lies. That's where your opportunity lies of healing, of becoming more learned about it. And I like to discuss the inner operating system because I want to take it out of these places that get so much stigma. I'm a big believer in, therapy and all those things. And I also feel like we've done such a disservice in our society. We've stigmatized all these things that to me are like the most natural things. Like why therapy is so stigmatized to me is such a disservice to society, because to me it should be like going to the dentist. Like, I mean, if not more, because this is what's running our lives, and every human is then impacting the entire world in some way, shape, or form, whether it's through having children and parenting little humans to become somebody else, whether it's you become a doctor. I mean, we're all creating this world. So why wouldn't we want to be an expert at ourselves? And there's such a miss there that I feel compelled to be a champion of, and so that you'll always hear versions of that from me. But in this case, how it relates is this opportunity to recognize that that's part of your story. It's not who you are. It's part of your narrative and understanding more about how you became where you are right now, and noticing it and waking up to it is where your power lies, and it sometimes it does require some healing. It requires, in most cases it does. And you don't need to be afraid of that, because look what you've already traversed. Like, you can heal. Like, you've already gone through so much challenge and suffering to get here, especially around something if you're identifying with inferiority. I mean, imagine what you've moved through that filter. So you can definitely, you've proven to yourself you can heal this. And it's often around having compassion for that. This is just part of being a human. It's not some special story. I mean, your story is unique to you, but the idea that this is happening is not special to you. It's not a defect in you. There's nothing wrong with you. It's part of the human condition. And what's missing in our world, from my perspective, is not enough inquiry, not enough taking the time to notice, not enough thinking, oh wow, that's something I probably could work on. That's something I could heal. That's something I can update. Oh, I don't need to let that run my life anymore. And that's really what's available. When you become conscious, that's the beginning. And then you need to take action. And that might mean working with a practitioner. It might mean journaling about it. It might mean going back and doing like a healing of memories, and like looking about when that began and seeing it from now, this adult version of you. It might mean becoming aware of how you can work with that young part of you that is always going to be with you. There's so many ways to shift it. And I hope my explanation and my story was helpful. What I thought was really powerful, at least even for me, was seeing how it kind of reared its head today. And even though it's uncomfortable and I can actually still feel that right here, I know that it's part of the nervous system wiring that became part of my development because of how I related to my youth and my coming of age. It's not who I am. It's not, I don't have to actually make choices from that. I can see it and go, oh, there she is, you know? So you have options, and being awake and conscious, starting to have compassion, working with it, and just really knowing, knowing that you are the leader of your life, and all those types of things is part of the curriculum that you are here to learn, and you are intended to learn. Your soul came here to learn. And the parents you got, the family, the culture, the skin color, all of that was all part of what your soul was destined to experience as part of your human experience. If you choose to, it's such a beautiful, more expanded way of seeing your human existence than just thinking at it in this kind of very 3D linear place of like the way we kind of walk in our world and do all these things and then maybe don't feel great. When you start to see and have a more expanded understanding of yourself, you can see so much more of who you are and why you're here. And if nothing else, you can know that you are definitely not alone. And any filter, any belief or idea that you picked up as a child or as a teenager even, that is not a defect. That's not a flaw in you. That's an adapted style of metabolizing your life in an effort to understand what's happening here. I mean, that's really it. My name is Jennifer Herrera. I'd love to have you here with me. I'll see you tomorrow.